So guys, the Elden Ring DLC Shadow of the Erdtree has finally dropped, and in my opinion, it's made Elden Ring definitely my favourite game of all time. DLC came with so much new stuff to explore, like new areas, new items, new armour, but most importantly, the bosses. There were a lot of bosses. So today, I'm going to be ranking the main 13 bosses in the entire DLC. Now, I'm going to be keeping in mind their design, enjoyability, and difficulty while ranking these, but my playthrough is going to look a lot different to somebody else's playthrough. So just keep that in mind. This list is my personal experience and my opinion, so if you disagree, feel free to let me know down in the comments. And without further ado, let's get straight into it. Oh, and by the way, spoiler warning ahead. So if you want to play through the DLC without any spoilers, go do it and then come back to this video. So coming in at number 13, we have Mattia, Mother of Fingers. Now I found her pretty late into my playthrough, which I think made her a lot easier to deal with than for someone who found her mid-game when she was intended. Mattia is a large boss made up of basically all fingers, and you get to her by progressing Count Ymir's questline in the Cathedral of Manus Mattia. Now, once you descend into her area below the cathedral, it looks amazing. It's the atmosphere is great, the music's great, but the issue I had with this boss is that it didn't feel like a remembrance boss, and the questline and the build up itself was more just run over here and interact with this. And when you actually got to fight her, at least with my build, I used Starfist for this one. It only took me a couple of tries and she didn't really feel like much of a challenge, other than the floating explosion attack that I literally cannot still figure out the timing of. So for those reasons, I'm gonna have to put her at number 13. Moving along to number 12, we have Romina, Saint of the Bud. Now, after fighting all the previous bosses in the DLC and traversing through her area, the Rao Ancient Ruins, I saw the Fog Gate and I was just expecting the worst, especially coming off another boss that I'll get to on this list. I thought difficulty was just going to ramp up and up and up, but to my surprise and relief, it felt like it had gone backwards. Now, to give credit to Romina, in most fights I use the golden summons to progress quest lines, because yes, I do enjoy lore. Crucify me here now. But even with those summons, most bosses still felt quite challenging, but Romina just didn't. Romina would just sometimes miss for no reason, and pair this with the fact that she's weak to basically every build in the game, especially having a low resist to Poise, Frost and Bleed, which are the three biggest, like, that's the widest set of builds in the entire game. It just meant that everybody was gonna have a much easier time with this boss than most of the other ones. She builds up Scarlet Rot, which is annoying, and she's got one attack, which is a sky attack where she like flies down at you like a missile. That's basically the hardest one to dodge, but other than that, she's quite easy to deal with, and it only took me a couple of tries. Romina's boss fight and her build up do look really good, and she is put in one of the nicest areas in the game, so that'll give her bonus points. But because of her lack of difficulty and how late she is in the game with this difficulty, I'm going to have to place her at the number 12 spot. Now down at number 11 we have the Golden Hippo. Now this is just another one of those bosses that becomes a regular enemy later in the game, but it has like a phase 2 in this fight. It's not a remembrance boss, but technically it's kind of mandatory if you want to explore all the areas in the game, so I'm going to put it on this list. And that's not to say that this boss isn't an incredibly fun fight, and it sets the tone perfectly for Shadowkeep. For me, I found it very enjoyable, other than the hitboxes. Now, I fought this guy with a Frostbite Great Katana, which is really good against him, and I think the DLC as a whole had a focus on making damage windows shorter, which is evidenced by combo length and movement, and this is really shown during the Hippo fight as he rolls around the entire arena, which is only small, but you find yourself running around after him, and he'll combo like upon combo to the point where you can only punish him maybe 1 in every 7 attacks, which is not what we've been used to before. We've been used to being able to punish every time. That's how long we've been playing the base game. So the main downside for this guy is the camera angles and the hitbox, because he's so big, the camera decides to like tweak out almost, and you can't actually, you can only just see inside the face. So a lot of times I'm left looking at the hippo's tongue instead of his whole body. But other than that, and the fact that he's not really a main boss, he's just a way to get into an area, I think the fight is incredibly enjoyable, and I look forward to it on my next playthrough. So for that reason, the Golden Hippo is our number 11 on this list. Moving on down to number 10, we have the Divine Beast Dancing Lion. I know, what a mouthful. The lion is the first major boss that most players will find in the DLC, and it's located in the Ballarat Tower settlement, which is the lowest scaled area on the map. That being said, if you haven't gotten a handful of the Erdtree fragments, this guy is a pain to deal with. I fought him around +3, and he was no joke for a first boss. He did the job of a Margit, where I went into this DLC expecting to roll everything with my bleed build, my frost build, my poise builds, and this guy sat me straight back down and had me gated 45 minutes before I could kill him. But there's a second one in the game, and as soon as I knew that there was a second one, I rushed straight to him, because that's how enjoyable this boss was. He does exactly what an entry boss is supposed to do. It's not too hard, but it really sets the tone for the rest of the DLC, and the difficulty is just perfect. Not only does he have rapid attacks, and the movement of this boss is insane, but it literally turns into the Avatar halfway through the fight. Like, you phase transition him, and he sends you back to the death screen Avatar Aang style the first couple times you fight him. He literally has like new attacks. There's literally a frost breath attack, or whatever element he's on, where he just spins in a circle. And the first time you see that, there's no chance you know what to do. He caught me out with that so many times. But this boss is great. The environment and build up is amazing, and once you kill him, you get to wear his helmet, which is really, really funny. So this guy is a solid boss to sit at our number 10 spot. So now, kicking off into the single digits, we have the Putrescent Knight at number 9. Now this guy is really cool. He's hidden in a secret area within a secret area. He's found by literally jumping off the map within the Stone Coffin Fissure, which is a sub area in the Cerulean Coast at the bottom of the map. The Putrescent Knight is this skeleton horse hybrid thing that looks really, really interesting, and you combine this with the area and the entrance, and you've got yourself a really, really memorable boss. But unfortunately, the jumping down into the abyss goes from extremely cool to incredibly tedious very, very quickly, as you've basically got to fall down for 15 to 20 seconds every time you want to fight him. Luckily for me, I killed him within the first 5-6 or so attempts, so I didn't get to this stage. But I know from what I've looked at, some people complain about the boss because you've got to jump down every time you fight him. I didn't really find him that hard because his attack patterns are quite easy to learn, with like the exception of his Ghost Flame attacks. But it's not the fact that they're not hard to dodge, it's the succession that they come in. He throws 7, 8, 9 attacks at you at once before you can even hit him. And then when you do hit him, it's kind of made up because he's got a smaller health pool. So this very fast-paced boss fight that's exactly what it is. It's just really fast-paced, which makes it quite fun if you're not using like a great sword builder. If you're using something that allows you to be nimble, you will really enjoy this boss fight. And it also unlocks a very, very, very interesting quest line. So I won't go into detail with it because it has quite major spoilers that I don't want to go into. But I'd go and check it out. If you've killed him and you didn't realise, I'd maybe just go and do it a couple more times, if you know what I mean. So all of this makes the Putrescent Knight a solid contender for our number 9 spot. Now moving on to the number 8 spot, we have Needle Knight Leda and various other NPCs from the DLC. So yep, again, one of the very final bosses of the story. It's another NPC fight, just like Gideon from the base game. But I really enjoyed this fight, and if you paid attention to the lore throughout the DLC, you'd know that it was inevitable. Now basically in this fight, Leda comes up to you and says that if you want to kill Mikola, you basically got to go through me. Now, what makes this fight a lot more enjoyable than Gideon, because as we know by now, Gideon is just a pushover, it basically becomes a 1v5, 1v6 depending on how you went about all the quest lines. So it's like a culmination of all these different stories coming together at once and like coming to a climax right before the final boss. So for me, I was able to summon someone for, I think it was Sir Ansbach, who was trying to get his own back from Moog, which has some pretty interesting lore implications. But I fought later Sir Moore and Dry Leaf Dane. Now, this can change. I've seen people fight in Hornsent, who I'd already killed. I've seen people fight in Freya, who I didn't even do the quest line for Freya because I forgot. But I think you can get it up to maybe a 5v2, 5v3. The bit where people struggle with this fight is that there's so many players that are anti-summon, but this fight is literally built for you to summon. And if you don't summon, it becomes like a 4, 5, 6v1, which a lot of people are complaining about because we know how NPCs fights can be, especially with Fia's champions. A lot of people hate that fight. But for me, who isn't opposed to using summons, this fight was very, very enjoyable. So it wasn't too difficult again, but it was just the right amount of difficulty to where it was fun. And that's why I've put Leda and the other NPCs at the number 8 spot. Now in at number 7 we have the Erdtree avatar. Now this fight is really something. The Erdtree avatar is basically, he's like the Shadow Tree avatar, because he's supposed to be like a reflection of the Erdtree avatar, which we fight many times in the base game. But this guy was much harder to kill, and that's why he is a remembrance boss. Now, From Software must have had a lot of fun in making this boss, because not only was I tricked once, but I was tricked twice, because this guy has 3 phases and 3 separate health bars. So you kill him once, thank God, he's dead. He comes back, fair enough. We've seen this before. You kill him again, I'm already waiting for my runes to drop, and he just pops up right behind me again and knocks me over. And phase 3 is supposedly the hardest of them all. I think I got really lucky because there's this explosion attack that he does that people say that they literally can't dodge. It's like a frame perfect window. I managed to get it first try. I have no idea how I did this, but let me tell you, I don't want to go back and see if I can do it again, because it nukes people's health bars, especially when you're on higher new game pluses. This guy his arena's really cool. And how you get him, you basically have to drain an entire flooded city to get to him, which is really cool. But he has so many attacks, and these attacks range from roots in the floor to, like I said before, the nuclear attack that people can't dodge. It is so deep underground that it is set at the roots of the Erdtree, which I think is really, really nice. It's a really nice touch. And there is a trick to this guy where once you get him down a phase, you can riposte him, and that'll kill him basically. But if you don't do that and wait for him to just disappear by himself, he won't come back full health next time. But I didn't know this until when I was watching my friends fight him. So thanks for that. That was something that could have saved me a lot of time. So I got to this guy around the mid game, which is where you're supposed to find him, which for me made him pretty difficult to fight because I was only around +9 Erdtree, maybe +10. But fire damage and taking a step back from him and hitting his head, because that does more damage, really made this fight manageable. So for me, that makes the Erdtree avatar a great person, or a great boss even, to slide at the number 7 spot. Down at number 6 we have Commander Gaius. Now I know, don't click off the video. Bunch of people are having PTSD from this guy because apparently he's extremely buggy and his hitboxes just don't work. But for me, I didn't have that issue. I found that on my 3rd attempt, I literally got him to the point where I couldn't see his health bar. But I was out of flasks and I got greedy and I just died. And it only took me about another hour and he was dead. Gaius is a very, very difficult boss, who's basically a Tree Sentinel on steroids, combined with Radon and his gravity attacks. Now, I used Starfist to kill this guy, so for me, the hitbox issues that other people were having, I didn't have because I was literally pressed up against him the entire fight. And I think that made the Gaius a much more enjoyable boss. He's very fast paced and he's very mobile, especially more so in his phase 2. But he also has very open windows for attacks. Like, there's one attack that he does where he will literally, he has about 2 or 3 seconds where you can just hit him. And I found that he's very, very poise breakable, especially with like a Craig Blade build like what I was using. So I was able to punish him a lot more. Now, for me, I love this fight because it was one of those bosses where once I beat him, I felt extremely accomplished. It was a boss where I thought it was fair, and it was a boss that really asked me to use a lot of my skills that I had as a Souls player. So to get to him, it's like a hidden area where you have to climb basically through the rafters in the roof of the specimen storeroom, which is a really cool idea. You can look down and see the entire area that you've already traversed. And once you get to him, you don't only get the remembrance, which gives you a really cool spear, which is supposedly quite good, but you also get 5 Erdtree fragments, so it's worth it. And also the view that you get of the actual Erdtree once you've killed him is probably one of the best in the entire DLC. So Gaius for me is one of my favourite boss fights in all of Souls, but the fact that he doesn't make the top 5 of this list really shows the level that FromSoft has gone into with this DLC. So for these reasons, Gaius is sitting at number 6. Breaking into our top 5 is Midra, Lord of Frenzied Flame. Now, Midra has probably got the best environment and build up in the entire game. So to get to him, you literally have to complete a catacombs, which everybody hates. I hate it. That's my least favourite part of this entire boss, but that's got nothing to do with him. You complete this catacombs and then you get to the Abyssal Forest. Now this is my favourite area in the DLC. I love the Frenzied Flame, and when I discovered this area and saw the signs on the floor, you know what I'm talking about if you've been here. You just knew something was about to go down. Now this area it's brilliant. Metal Gear Solid style the whole way through. Midra doesn't only look cool, but for when you can find him in the game, which is really early on, he is challenging. He's very fast paced. He turns into a literal Beyblade, and combine that with his Frenzied Flame attacks, he can end your run in a second, give you madness, you're dead. This guy, he's got a really good kit to get you stuck for a while, but a good thing about him is he's very easy to poise break, and when I was using my Star Fists, he's also prone to bleed as well. So the short punishable windows that he has are very exploitable. I love this fight and I love the area, and for that reason Midra kicks off our number 5 and our top 5 spot on this list. So moving down on to number 4 is Rellana, twin sister of Renala and the Sword of Mesmer. Rellana is such a difficult fight, especially the fact that she's literally the second boss that you find in the DLC, and people are still trying to figure out how to get the Erdtree, so I got to her around +3. She is not a +3 fight. She uses Glintstone and Carrion Sorcery and also Mesmer's Flame, so she's basically covered to break down any sort of resistance you have. Now, like, if you imagine the Sword of Night and Flame and how strong that was, then just imagine that put on steroids and give it to a boss, and that's Rellana. And combine that with her twin moon attacks that bounce you around and will one-shot you, and you have one of the hardest bosses in the game. I found this fight to be basically a dance, where you have to be perfect, hit every strafe, dodge, jump to land an attack, and like all bosses, practice makes perfect, and she can be learned. I had a ton of fun with this boss, and for that reason she is at the number 4 spot. So now we're getting into the top 3, and these guys are no joke. So starting at number 3, we have Mesmer the Impaler. So Mesmer is on the cover of the game and sits atop the Shadowkeep, which is the main legacy dungeon in the DLC, for a good reason. You enter this guy's boss room and the cutscene just sets the tone. It's brilliant. It's one of the best cutscenes in the game. This fight is basically almost like a movie. It's very cinematic. He's like the main character from some dark fantasy anime. His attacks are relentless and lethal. And when you get hit, that it can be the end of a run just by getting hit once, because of the quick succession that he fights in. Once you get into phase transition as well, he literally pulls out his own eyeball and goes all Rykard on you. And I don't know what this fight doesn't have. The small but yet fair punish windows are easily dealt with, or not easily dealt with, but are best dealt with bleed and poise builds. And I don't think this fight has any flaws. I'd say you could argue Mesmer is a top 3 boss fight across all Souls title, and he's definitely earned the number 3 spot on this list. Coming in at number 2, we have Bale the Dread. Now, this guy is the embodiment of aura in Elden Ring, and if you paid attention to the lore, you would know that this guy literally went toe to toe with Placidusax, who ruled the lands between before anyone else, and the battle ended in a standstill. That's why Placidusax is so weak when we fight him. Luckily for us, when we fight him though, he is also missing all his limbs, but that doesn't make him a pushover by any means, and I'd say he's the second hardest boss in the DLC and probably the game. I found this guy maybe on par with Melania, because I found him quite early into the game, and he's got a plethora of attacks that deal huge damage and can be comboed in quick succession. But he also has a phase 2 where he starts using laser beams, and any boss that uses laser beams is going to be difficult. Now I thought this guy he's quite learnable though, which means that you can learn his attacks and it becomes quite fair. He also gets bonus points because of how amazing his questline is. You meet the NPC Igon, and if you've met him, you know how amazing he is. He's the best NPC in the DLC by far. But even if you're against summoning, full stop, I'd say just summon him anyway, because he makes the fight so much more enjoyable, and his voice lines is so funny to listen to. And for these reasons, I think Bale has to sit at our penultimate spot on the list. And finally, we're at the number 1 spot, and you've probably guessed who it is already. That's right, step aside Melania, there is a new hardest boss in the game, and he goes by Consort Radahn. Players once thought that the original Radahn was way too hard, but he doesn't even hold a candle to this monster. Prime Radahn is being coined as the final boss of the DLC, and that is for a great reason. This guy has a plethora of attacks and combos that can last literally 20 seconds before you can even get a hit in yourself. This fight requires players to use all of their knowledge and skill to even stand a chance. But wait, there's still more. His phase 2 gives himself multiple one-shot attacks, and he has a grab ability that can literally insta-kill you no matter what health you have. He also sends projectiles of himself at the player that fast that you're encouraged to panic roll, and he really takes the cake for the pinnacle of difficulty in any Souls game. I think it's probably the hardest boss ever made. But, however, with the right build and a bit of luck, you can learn his patterns and beat him. He also has an entire final area of the game to himself, meaning that Anir Elim, which is the final legacy dungeon, is all building up to this tremendous fight. His arena and his cutscenes are top of the line. I don't think I could have asked for any more from FromSoft with this final boss. And that's why I think Consort Radahn has rightfully earned his spot atop this list. So there you go. That's every major boss from the new Shadow of the Erdtree DLC ranked. I hope you enjoyed the video, and thanks for everyone that is still watching. It really means a lot. Feel free to share your opinions about my rankings in the comments down below and tell me about your experience in the Shadow Realm. A like down below, as always, really helps out the channel, so please leave one down below if you did enjoy this video. But that's all from me today. I'll be going back into the DLC very shortly to give you guys guides, secrets and more, so stay tuned on the channel. And until then, I'll see you later. Goodbye.